Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Oh my God, we're going to have so much fun. I hope you have your laugh factor going, because today we're going to be talking to Jerry Pippin from, what was that website? Soul Healer, from jerrypippin.com. Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about Jerry here in a minute, but I just want to remind you that Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the services that I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy medicine consultations, as well as clairvoyant readings. They're available for you from the comfort of your own home, or if you're in the Dallas Metroplex area, you can stop in and have an appointment. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where if you're looking to become a medical intuitive or energy medicine practitioner, check it out. You can also learn to do all of this from your home. Please do check out the Just Energy Radio website. That's www.justenergyradio.com, where you can find out about all the guests we have coming up, and sign up for our newsletter, where we will keep you informed of our excellent programming that's coming up. You can also listen to all of our archives. There's over 5 years' worth of archives on the site, all free to download. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Jerry, and we'll get him on the air. Okay, Jerry Pippin has for well over 4 decades of broadcast experience with top-rated shows in syndication in the 80s and 90s, and in the 21st century, he is a leader in Internet broadcasting with regular programs on varied subjects, from conspiracy topics such as 9/11 and JFK to paranormal and UFO topics, including broadcasts from Roswell, Area 51, and other exotic locations. He also does entertainment programming with programs from Las Vegas on a regular basis. And anybody that's really in the UFO paranormal community, everybody knows Jerry Pippin. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Jerry Pippin. Hey Jerry, how's it going?
It's great to be back on the air with you.
It's always wonderful to have you back on. I have to tell you, whenever you and I are on the air together, my husband always goes, "That was a great show." The energy and exchange and bantering that happens between the two of you is just a lot of fun and entertaining. You know, it's entertaining. So that was the right website, right?
Years. We go back a few years, and we've had a lot of fun doing a lot of radio shows together.
Yes, we
have.
And
I hope I can live up to the previous reputation.
Well, I'm sure you will, because you always do. So, Jerry, that was the right website, right? Soulhealer.com, right?
Yeah, it's jerrypippin.com, JERRYPIPPIN.com. Of course, P is in Paul. We have a little standard joke about that. We had a lot of fun down in Dallas one time at a conference in which I got the whole audience to start chanting my website. Remember that time? That was a great Saturday.
That's why whenever I say your name, if I talk about you on air during a different show, I'll say, well, Jerry Pippin of JerryPippin.com. I mean, because it's just like one sentence. You kind of can't get away from it in my mind. I don't know.
We first went on the Internet as kind of a backup to our regular radio shows, like everybody else did back in the late 90s. And ultimately, the technology came around where, you can broadcast, and almost anybody can get you now, even on an iPhone or on other phones and whatever. So we're quite happy being on the Internet now, and have been for some time. We're pretty proud of our record of on-demand broadcasting, and we started that a long time before a lot of people did. And I notice you have over 5 years of archives, including some of my shows. Can you believe that,
Jerry? Yeah, all of here. Wait a minute, I'm going to click on your link, and I'm going to try to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, this will be 8. So yeah.
Well, you're almost up with me.
How long
I noticed something happened this morning on Facebook. You may not have noticed it. I noticed you were promoting the show, but they had a hack job going on. I don't know if you knew it or not.
On
Anonymous,
my stuff?
the hacking group, crashed Facebook, and it didn't affect my Facebook, but it did some people. Over thousands were without service for a while.
Well, I guess that happened to a friend of mine, and he got some little funky note saying, that they fixed his page, but he's uploaded hundreds of pictures of archaeological stuff from South America, Inca stuff, elongated heads, and if they eliminated his archive, that would be a shame to get hundreds of pictures. So, anyway.
Well, I think Facebook's going to restore it all. I'm not sure. I think they have a backup.
Well, it'll be interesting now that they've gone public, what kind of impact that is going to have on the service they provide and who has access to the information. I mean, one of the things that, you're a conspiracy guy. You'll understand where I'm coming from with this. One of the things about Facebook that kind of scares me is that they have access to everything that you post and are happy and willing to share it with anybody. It's really not private between you and your friends.
Well, you go on Facebook, they're going to be doing that to you. So I guess, you do it at your own risk. But you're right,
you and I know
privacy
that.
left. And some people put things on Facebook I'd never dream of putting on Facebook. And, of course, I've had hackers over the years put some pretty naughty things that I say on Facebook, and, of course, I didn't say them.
I don't know.
Does that happen to you?
Thank God, no. But I can see you saying naughty things.
And I get, all kinds of weird things. So you I guess maybe we even don't need to worry about whether or not the postings are really ours to show up. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us to go back and look at those postings and make sure they are. And if they're not, delete them and, post a denial. And, of course, we can see the unintended consequences of that pretty easily. You could put up anything you wanted to, then come back and say, well, I didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's a new world. That's all I can say.
Very new. So I hear that you are actually doing live shows now on Inception Radio?
I'm doing live on Monday nights, mostly. I actually have been doing live for 4 or 5 months now, simply because I'm rebuilding my studio. And I don't know if you've ever done any outside contracting or not, but people come in and they said they'd be through last month, and they're still not through. And so basically we'll continue with Inception Radio. And they have been very nice to me. and we use that on Monday nights between 6 and 8 Central Time, maybe 7 to 9 Eastern. It's basically UFO shows, period. Mm-hmm. And this coming Monday night, we have kind of an interesting show. In fact, it's a very interesting show, and if people have not heard any of the things that we've done from Roswell, and you and I had a lot of fun in Roswell together.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that maybe before it's over. But this Monday night, we're doing a 4-hour show, and 2 hours and 22 minutes of it is a radio drama, and it's all about magic and whether or not that really existed. And it was started, with the Roswell crash to keep everything secret in 1947. And we have a major playwright who wrote the play, and it was performed in front of a live audience in Roswell, and we recorded it, and then added sound effects and original music by a guy named Janus, who's over in England and has done several CDs about UFOs. His latest is about Rendlesham, but before that he did a CD on Roswell, and we used some of that music, plus he created some original music for us. So what we're going to do on Monday night is pretty interesting, I think. We're going to open it up with kind of a late breaking story about what's happening in Roswell now, live, and take a few phone calls, maybe have a guest. And then we're going to play this recording of this drama, an old-fashioned radio drama, in which Marty Miller, the guy that wrote the play, has done exceptional work on just about everything that happened at Roswell is covered in this play. So if you wonder what happened, and I'm talking about from the moment it happened at 10 minutes to midnight on the 4th of July, and it opens up with some people at a convent there that know that they just have a feeling that there's something supernatural about to happen. And then it goes on from that point to the retrieval of the crash material, the complete story as is laid out about trying to keep it quiet, threatening witnesses, what happened actually as far as people from Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon flying in, which they did, and also covers everything, all about the whole story. And then when it's over, we're going to discuss Roswell with the audience, a live phone-in, and also we'll have another guest with a witness that nobody's heard about that we'll reveal on Monday night. And so it'll be a good show. It runs, as I say, from 7 to 11 Eastern, and then they repeat it as well a couple of times during the week. And we will have, we'll be unveiling our new Roswell section on our website. Are you ready? At jerrypippin.com. And
is that jerrypippin.com?
Yeah, and that'll be coming up this month. As you know, we're coming up on the 65th anniversary of Roswell, and from the date of the crash. And interestingly enough, they're not having it over the 4th of July. They're having it the weekend before. And I'm not quite sure why that's planned that way, but as you know, there's a lot of friction in Roswell, lots of different elements. A lot of different people want to do different things. And so they're doing the best that you can, and I have noticed that the same thing's been happening with other places. Maybe it's dirty tricks by the Defense Department or somebody, but they are able to get witnesses and people with good faith, researchers, etc., suddenly to turn on each other. Have you noticed that? That happened in Roswell even.
No, I don't you're the UFO guy. I'm the ancient mystery psychic chick. So share with the listeners, because I have not heard that, and that's interesting.
Well, they basically get the witnesses to go after each other. They start telling little tales. Even this last weekend, up at Area 51 at the conference they have up there, they had a lot of people going after each other. It's over, usually not over anything about UFOs. It's about personal things, about whose girlfriends, who's doing what to whom, and things like that. And, it just keeps building and building. And over in England, the Rendlesham Forest incident, which we can discuss a little bit if you'd like, and they have witnesses that are just going after each other like cats and dogs. And what happens is I think somebody orchestrates that. And I think that somebody is, either the CIA or the Pentagon or Black Operations, and I don't want to sound too much of a conspiracy guy, but I'm convinced it's happening that way.
So you think that there are individuals kind of infiltrating these groups, just stirring the pot?
Yes. And I think they've got it down to a science. And I think that if you watch almost any of these, and it's not with just UFOs, it's with almost any of these things where perhaps the hand of the government or somebody has been involved in creating some sort of false flag or black operation detail. The best way to cover it up is to keep the witnesses who actually saw things to be, get involved in these emotional battles, and it muddies the waters. And they've got this down to a science. I don't think they even have to use any mind control or exotic weapons. All they have to do is just send somebody in there that's politics is that way too. And they do that in politics quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's called dirty tricks. And basically, if you can get into somebody's political camp and stir a little discontent, then it cripples the campaign. And that's used quite often, and it's been a matter of record over the years. With many campaigns, goes back to Dick Nixon and maybe before that. And so I think what I'm trying to say here is that most things that we perceive as the true story, there's always something going on behind the scenes. And they've got this down to a pretty good science now, and there's certain people that are really specialized in it. And so specialize in being the dirty trickster.
But why in the UFO community do they feel like they're getting too close or asking too much? It doesn't seem like they have that much influence and power.
Well, you're talking about the UFO researchers themselves not having enough power. Well, you're right about that. But the best way to do that is if you're getting close to a story and you're getting close to the truth, is to keep muddying the waters. I mean, let's take a look at Roswell alone. There have been so many far-out theories about Roswell. Now, let's give everybody a break here, and what I think really happened is a pretty far-out theory itself. And that is that in 1947, at a few minutes before midnight during a thunderstorm, a UFO crashed, and there were occupants in it. We discovered the occupants. We took them to the Army Air Force Base there in Roswell, and then flew them on out to other places where perhaps they still exist. At least the records of the bodies recovered does, and some people say there was one or maybe two live occupants, and we can get into some of that here in a minute. But the point is that that's a pretty far out story right there. But that, in my opinion, after 600 witnesses interviewed by Don Schmidt and a few others, is just, and Stanton Friedman's done quite a lot of work on it as well, and quite a few other researchers. Dennis Balthazar's done some work on it. The point is that there's 600 witnesses that are saying they saw something, that something happened, and it was always first-hand stories. So with all of those witnesses out there, where there's smoke, I believe there's fire. And I believe if I were an attorney, I could go into a courtroom and prove by circumstantial evidence that something like that happened in Roswell. Okay, now we fast forward to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. Suddenly this is, it went away, that story went away, even though it was in the newspapers. It was all over the place in the 50s. UFO sightings were everywhere over the Capitol. It was even several UFO stories in the Washington Post with pictures of UFOs over the Capitol building itself in D.C. I remember I was in junior high school at the time, and our local paper here in the little town of Muskogee where I live in Oklahoma, they had a picture of a UFO over the White House in 1952. I still remember that to this day. That was probably the main reason I got involved in this type of show. I didn't start, I was a little young to be doing radio at that time, but I did start fairly young. I started in high school, but not doing talk shows, of course, not till later. But we decided we'd do talk shows because we're very interested in this subject. And in addition, science fiction series such as The X-Files and all, you name it, they were all very popular. So I thought, in my reasoning, why not do some real-life X-Files? And so we started doing some conspiracy shows on our talk shows. But back to Roswell and what happened in the 50th anniversary, the Air Force came out with a telephone book-sized report saying that it was dummies. And they named the crash dummy that they used, and it was in the balloons, and they were floating them up and testing them, and et cetera, according to this report. The only problem with that report was that those particular type dummies were not available for 5 years after Roswell. They weren't available till 52. And so then later on we come along here, and Nick Redfern, who I think you know,
he has a cot here in our studio.
Yeah, he came out with a book that said there was Japanese prisoners of war, and we were using them. And he quoted some sources for that. And then last year we had Annie Jacobson's book, in which she wrote about Area 51, and the thing that got all the attention was one chapter in which she said that this was Joseph Mengele of Nazi fame, the Dr. Death, who had experimented with building mutants, teenagers. And he had gone to Russia when the war was over, which is not true. He went down to South America. But he'd gone to Russia, and they had put these mutant teenagers in a craft that the Nazis had developed. Well, they did develop a flying disc in the 30s.
That Bell thing?
Yeah, and the only problem, it couldn't fly that far. And this, to fly from the Soviet Union to Roswell, New Mexico, meant that would have to go through all of our radar and defensive commands during the height of the Cold War in 1947 and somehow make a crash in Roswell. So you keep getting all these far-out stories, and they're all there for one reason, and that's to muddy the waters. Because the average person out here is not following this every day like I am. They hear a headline or an interview here or there, and that's basically all it is. It's just a headline, and you go on to something else. And you and me and any other human being that uses their mind recall some of these things they heard in the past, and they start putting them together. So we're at a point, Rita, where if a UFO landed on the White House lawn today, every TV network, of course, would be there, and they would cover it. And President Obama might come out of the White House and shake hands with the ET. And within 2 or 3 hours from the time that happened, the opposition candidates and political powers would be on television saying it was a Hollywood liberal idea to bring Obama back so he could get elected, and that this was special effects, and on and on and on. So I think if you even brought an extraterrestrial to a press conference, there'd be people that would not believe it. On one hand, that's kind of healthy that we don't take everything with truth when we see it on television. And on the other hand, cynicism has risen to a dangerous, very dangerous proportion at this time. Most people don't really accept almost anything. If you really talk to them and listen to them a little bit, they'll say, well, that's what they say. I guess that's true. Things like that.
Yeah, it's a joke.
How is that for a short answer?
I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting about, like someone like you, someone like me, is that we have a very unique perspective. There's doing our own research, which I love researching, and I know you love reading and kind of keeping up to date, but we become kind of a filter for other people's research. So there's what we look at and what we think about. And then we have people like Stanton Freeman coming in, or like I have Richard Dolan scheduled to come on to talk about his new work, and Nick Redfern, all kind of giving us these little pieces of other information so we can almost take it's like we're in a position where we can kind of take a step back and process a lot of different people's information into our little database of material.
Well, that's true. And this is, again, the reason, I guess, the human mind is superior to the computer, even though the computers are pretty much of a miracle. And that is that we can reason, and we do have the ability to assimilate data. And if we are objective, and of course that's the big problem, being objective. Most people, I don't guess anybody's 100% objective. We have our own background, our own ideas, the way we were reared, the way we want to believe. And so we try to make all of those new facts that we find fit into what we want to believe, which makes our job as a talk show host to deal in these subjects a little difficult, I think, simply because people listen with a jaded ear, so to speak. In other words, they listen and say, oh, yeah, sure. They find it interesting, very entertaining. But are we making a lot of dents? I think we are. It's the reason I have continued to do this for so many years. But it's basically, I think the problem we have when we talk about not only UFOs but conspiracies in general is the fact that some of these things happen on a regular basis, like cops pulling a black man over and beating the hell out of him, and we just kind of get jaded about it and say, oh, that doesn't happen very often. That was just something unusual. And so then after a while, the people who are doing these dastardly acts, whatever those dastardly acts are pretty well to do. They can do it with impunity. And they abused what the thing that should be getting them and nailing them to the wall, they use that as a defense, and that is this mixed bag of information we get every day. And it's kind of like a buffet where you can reach over and grab an idea that fits your ideology and hold on to it. And then it's be damned with the facts later, simply because we believe with all our heart and soul it was this way. This of course, is very true in religion. Mm-hmm. But it's true in almost anything. Politics, you name it. Even probably in what you want to order for dinner.
But it seems
you're
like
dealing those sort of things, diet and things like that, and some people, regardless of knowing that a certain food is bad for them because of their certain condition, still insist on eating it.
Because it's tasty.
And I found that be first-hand experience since I've been having some health problems with my kidneys. I'm on a very strict diet to avoid dialysis, and the problem is that I basically, the foods that I like, I've been eating all the wrong things all my life, and so, and I'm sure you can expand upon that a lot better than me. But fortunately, as far as I would talk about, I don't sound very good today, and I apologize for that. But it's not anything drastic for anybody to be worried about. I think that I'm just got a few problems here with my voice today, and that might even be as simple as being just we have had strange weather in my part of the country, Texas and Oklahoma. Been kind of cool, and the pollen has been blowing around, and that's probably what's affecting me. So people shouldn't read much more into it. But this dialysis thing and my kidneys, I've had the same problems for now 8 years, and nothing's happened to me. And so, for a long time I didn't pay much attention to it, even though my doctors kept getting alarmed. But it could be, I guess it could go any time. And if I didn't know better, I would say I've been under a biological attack from somebody, because I've had unbelievable situations. I've had an infection that nobody could identify. That first it swelled up my hand and my arm, and after several trips of antibiotics down the journey of taking antibiotics, and some of them making you deathly ill and some of them not, and many blood tests and many other tests, they really couldn't find out exactly what was wrong. There was some kind of staph infection involved. It was a dirty mix of something in my blood that I should not have had. And now it's attacked me on my left foot and my left arm. I mean, my left leg. And I'm once again getting ready for another long, I guess, journey for blood test and to find out what's there. And meanwhile, I had another thing happen to me, and I went to have some elective surgery in case my kidneys did really go, that I'd be ready for dialysis, and flunked my EKG. And so I took several other tests with several other people, and all the tests were mixed. And I seem to have some shortage of breath, and seem to have lost energy. And so but I haven't done the angiogram thing, which is pretty simple to a routine operation these days, simply because with all the modern medical science they have, evidently, there's not any dye, unless you know about something, Rita, that does not affect your kidneys when they shoot it in there to see if you have blockage in your veins. And as my surgeon said, the hospital's going to ask me what the hell I'm doing to you if I do this to you, and so I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place there. But we're treating it all with diet and medications and things, and most of the days I feel pretty good. And,
well, I mean, one of the things that I find about the medical community is that they'll look at your test, but they really won't dig any deeper. You know, unless, I mean, I don't know what you have to do. I've had so many clients that have things going on. They go through the test, and the doctor's like, well, you know, come back in 6 months, you know, because maybe you'll be worse, and we'll do something at that point in time. Meanwhile, they can't get out of bed. And I've told people, you know, you have this weird infection that you need to go to, like, a virologist for them to assess you because it's not normal, it's not typical, and, you know, you need somebody that's actually, like, going to do some research on you and do some digging, you know, like a Dr. House. You know, you need somebody that's going to actually, you know, put you in their radar and focus on it as opposed to waiting for you to have some other kind of symptom. So
I agree with you. And we've been doing the best we can, but it's pretty tough. The medical profession is pretty well confined to just routine things and going on about it. Don't you agree?
Well, and that's going to get even worse once Obamacare, you know, comes into play. I mean, you know, they're already scared. The medical community is already scared of what that's really going to do to health care. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah. I'm, I'd like to throw something out here for since I've had all of a sudden a lot of experience with the medical profession in the last 2 years, and before that I was fairly healthy and really very seldom ever saw a doctor, and that basically was that. I don't find the doctors themselves, a few of them maybe politically would be inclined to not like things like Medicare, but most of them would be out of business if it weren't for Medicare. If you add up their ratio of patients, how many people they see, and how they're getting their tests, and they get paid for all of this, you know, and the unintended consequences of that, of course, is that it'll end up being a lot of people getting treated for a lot of things they don't need. And I don't know how you handle all of this. I have my own pet theory about it, and I think that is the big mistake they made, and, of course, Obama couldn't get it through, and he didn't try to get it through, and he should have tried to get it through, was to have a single payer system in competition with the other medical groups. In other words, we're talking about you can make regulations that make people really strong and make them have to do certain things and resent it, or you can actually set up a situation where you have a nonprofit entity such as the federal government or a third party or whatever they set up, and this nonprofit entity is treating people as well, so then the insurance companies and the medical profession itself would have to rise to the occasion. Right now they pretty much can do what they want to do, and they can charge what they want.
Well, it's a money-making enterprise. More tests, more money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't. We were having this conversation the other day about diabetes. is they've been working on diabetes since the 50s, or like muscular dystrophy, you know, the Jerry Lewis telethon, collecting millions and billions probably of dollars, but there's no cure. I mean, I don't know if, you know, trying to create a cure is something that we should just say is unrealistic, and the only way that it can be dealt with is for it to be treated. And if they could just say that this is a fact of life, it cannot be cured. We can't give you a one-time pill or do this little bit of surgery and you're cured for the rest of your life. You know, but at least be honest about it. You know, but it seems like they just want to treat it and put you onto some kind of prescription medication so that they can just charge you for the rest of your life for taking the same thing over and over again. But at least, you know, if that's the case, be honest about it.
Well, I agree with you completely, and it's amazing. They may not be able to cure diabetes, and probably the reason they can is we're ingesting all the wrong kind of things into our body from the age of 1 year old or maybe under. You know, I mean, look. You just go to the. I went to the post office yesterday, and I was standing around like everybody else has to at the post office these days, waiting to get waited on. And everybody in that line, and there was probably 12 people, and 8 of them were overweight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every place you look, people are, you know, we're not taking care of ourselves.
I mean,
I think
I've
that's
seen
part
people.
of the problem. Just like talking about the possibility of my kidney failure, it's operating, I think, at 22%. I think it always has been for the last 10 years. Maybe it's always been that way. How would I know? I didn't have it tested, you know. But the point is that I was eating the wrong foods. I mean, it's pretty simple what the kidneys does. And the kidneys are kind of like, remember those old, well, you probably are too young to remember it, but back in the dairy farm business, when you had individual family dairy farms, they had a place where you pour the milk in, and they would screen out all the stuff before you take it to the dairy. Well, that's what the kidneys do. They screen out everything in the blood. And now if you have diabetes, then all of a sudden you have too much sugar there, and that little screen, and I'm making this simple and probably making you cringe because you are into the health business and probably could explain it much better than me. But it basically screens out all of these things out of the blood, your kidneys does. And here we're talking about diabetes gumming up the works. This would be the same thing if you were trying to screen something and all of a sudden your screen was all sticky. And that's what happens with diabetes. And then, of course, the other major problem with kidneys is blood pressure. And the blood pressure breaks those little things, the little screens, and they can't really screen properly. And so why does half of America all of a sudden own blood pressure pills? I guess we do have a pretty frantic society, but it's I think most people, if you take the blood pressure over a given week, that have several readings, some of them a little high, some a little low.
Well, no, I agree that, you know, the foods that we eat are awful, you know, and the foods that we're trained to eat, and I feel like my generation are like the last ones that learned how to cook food, you know, like Betty Crocker cookbook, you know, how to cook a chicken and vegetables without taking it out of the freezer, you know, and microwaving it. And people nowadays are being brought up to live on fast food, live on frozen foods, consume sugar. I have seen so many adults buy their 8-year-olds, maybe younger, Starbucks Frappuccinos with coffee, with all that sugar and crap in it. And I'm just like, they should take your children away from you, because that's just, not just the sugar part, but you're also like giving them all this caffeine at 8 o'clock in the morning. It just is not right, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you, and I don't unfortunately see it changing.
No, because
probably
it's
need
cheaper.
to get off that subject and get back
cheaper to make it.
Something.
Okay.
A little
all right.
more pleasant. I don't know. It's up to you. It's your show.
Anyway, let's go back to Roswell. You know, one of the things that you were talking about, and it doesn't have to be about Roswell, but just the whole UFO phenomena, is the concept of so many people witnessing an event. You know, and so we have people witnessing an event here. We have people witnessing an event in Rendlesham. We have people witnessing an event in Stephenville. We have people, you know, in this area witnessing an event. And we have all of these events happening over time. In a court of law, you would think that just based on the preponderance of evidence, that it should be deemed as being true and convincing versus unreliable and fantasy.
Well, here's again this reason I said I think it's circumstantially I could prove something in court that something happened, because do you think there are millions of people that are great fiction writers? Maybe so. Do they all just come forward and make these things up? It just doesn't seem very logical to me that would be what's happening. Now, I understand that there are people that are doing that naturally, but I would hope that would be the minority. And even if you could explain, and we have had many detectives and many people with police backgrounds, investigative backgrounds, investigate things in the UFO and paranormal industry. And even if you could do all of that, there's still a lot of it that doesn't add up. In other words, there's some direct evidence, and people do see things. We could talk about any kind of the phenomena you want to, but abductions is probably one of the best things to discuss. And I can tell you, and please don't misunderstand me, audience, I still do abduction shows, and I think there's something going on. But many of these people that I run across that have had extraterrestrial abductions, they are not, how shall I say this?
Well,
they're not completely balanced anymore. But then you go back to, wouldn't this event affect you? Wouldn't this event make you not rational sometimes? So I don't think you can just take somebody that comes and tells you a story and say, well, they're nuts. I think you need to explain and understand why they are the way they are. And I've come up to the conclusion that there is something going on. That there is something. Maybe not all of the people that come forward have had things happen to them. But many people have had night visitors in their dreams, and they have night sweats, and they can't move, and we were talking about my health problems earlier. Being the conspiracy guy, the first thing I was thinking about was who shot me with a needle, or who gave me something to give me these infections. And I live a pretty protective life. I don't get out a whole lot. I don't. I'm a workaholic. I work a long time on my shows and on my websites and in the industry itself. And there's a lot of things behind the scenes that a lot of people don't think about working on. As you know, Rita, you're one of the best of covering the advertising angles and the promotional angles, and all those things have to be done. So I'm not out here mixing around with people, so I don't know that anybody could have dropped a vial of something in my food or come into my apartment and give me a needle in the middle of the night. And I don't think anything like that happened, but it could have. And so when we talk about abductions and the UFO experience itself, here again, some people have heard these stories. They've seen the horror movies. They've seen the things. So naturally, some of them are being affected. But I think there's a lot of evidence that something is going on. Now, how do you prove it? I don't know.
No, I agree.
What's your idea about abductions? What do you think?
I mean, I'm not an abduction person, but I'm going to give a parallel. Because I do a lot of work with entity attachments and helping people get dark and negative entities out of their life, out of their auric field, and get rid of them. And I have some people that come to me that truly, in my opinion, have an entity attachment. I can touch them, I can feel them, I can move them to the other side of the room. And then I have other people that come, and what's interesting, and I'm going to make this point, and I'd like for you to kind of reflect back with the UFO people. It's the people that come and say, well, this is what's going on in my life, and then I reflect back to them, I think you have an entity attachment. I think you're having an issue. Versus the people that say, I have an entity attachment, and, it's creating all of these problems in my life, and I've had people, it's like, well, my life sucks, I've lost my job, I lost my house, I lost this, this is going on, my horse died, my cat got run over, it must be an entity attachment. And what I have found is that the people that typically come because they're having some other kind of issue going on, not really aware of the entity attachment, maybe have a suspicion that there might be something going on in that area, typically will have something going on in that area versus the people that declare, I have an entity attachment. Do you find the same thing with the abduction where somebody might be having symptoms of PTSD and they go and they uncover that they've been abducted versus someone that just says, I was abducted by aliens, and here's my story, and they have this very clear recall, which to me is a kind of a red flag.
I was thinking about that yesterday, as a matter of fact. Somebody had some documentation on something. They were trying to tell me about something. And I was thinking, now, if that happened to me, would I have any documentation? In other words, that's the whole difficulty of all of this, in my opinion. And do I think there's extraterrestrial abductions? Yes. Now, do I think, and you and I have discussed this, we even did that show at Jefferson, Texas, and the most haunted town in Texas, and we've done a few other things together. Do I think there are demons out there? I'm not so sure. And but does that mean they're there? Of course not. Just because Jerry Pippin thinks something doesn't make it true, or does it make it false? If you understand what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. In other words, we're dealing here in a subject matter, the paranormal especially, and UFOs as well, that's hard to prove. And, we've proven, I always like eyewitnesses, even though I understand eyewitnesses sometimes manufacture what they've seen after a while. And sometimes what we see is not what we really thought we saw. And that is a psychological problem that we all have with the human brain. But I think if enough people say they've seen something, then they've seen something. And when we talk about the UFO issue, the people have seen UFOs. A lot of people have seen some of them up close and personal, but yet somehow we just dismiss it. And part of that came back from the government in the cover-up of 1947 and maybe earlier. There have been reports of, in fact, I've done a show, you may have done one with Remy Baca, in which he was a young man in New Mexico in 1945. He was by young, I mean 5 or 6, maybe 7 at the point when he saw it. He went out to look for one of the missing cows on his father's ranch, and with a childhood friend, and while they were out there, the thunderstorm came up. They got underneath a ledge, and a UFO crashed right in front of them. And this happened about 20 months before Roswell. Now, what makes this interesting is the fact that not only did they see the entities inside the UFO, and they said they look like ants. So if you stop and think about a little gray, maybe to a young man it might look like an ant. And he said they were squealing like rabbits in pain, and they didn't know what to do. They were afraid to go too close to it. They went back home and told their father about it, and he kind of dismissed it, but he said, I'll go out there and look in a couple of days. And so they did go back out. This is in a very remote part of New Mexico, up at the top of the White Sands Missile Range. And missile range at this point was involved in some nuclear top secret development. Remember, this was right after the war. It was winding down. It was almost over. And basically, we had more than one story about UFOs being interested in nuclear devices and watching our development of it. And I can get into that in a little bit as well, and probably will. But they went back out, and the father took a highway patrol friend, and they went back out, and there was the craft there, but the entities were missing. No one knows whether or not another group of entities came and rescued them, much like we do in the armed forces today. You know, we don't leave our dead or injured laying around, so why would they? And secondly, maybe they just went off into the wilderness there and the desert. But at any rate, as far as we know, nobody ever saw them. But the Army was so lax in retrieving this vehicle. They did, but it took them about 2 weeks. They sent a group of enlisted men over there to get it, and every night they go down to the one bar in the whole area and have a few drinks and dinner, and these two boys would sneak back and look inside the saucer. And in fact, they got a piece of it, and later 40 years later, got it tested. And there's a lot more to the story. And if they want to find it, they can just go over to jerrypippin.com, and it's also on iPodshows.net, and they can hear that story. It's basically, we get stories like this from witnesses, and you would think this would be an earth-shaking thing, but nobody has paid much attention to the story. It's been kind of a whole.
I've never heard that story. And that was before the whole Roswell thing, and I think it's fascinating that there was
Roswell.
But there was no, the government didn't jump all over it.
They tried to talk to a few people about it, and their parents told them not to talk. In fact, that's the end of the story. Probably the best way to wrap it up is, guess what? The officer from the Army base, White Sands Missile Base, came by the family after they had retrieved it and hauled it off on a flatbed truck, or I guess a lowboy. If they existed, lowboys back in those days, I guess they did. They came back and they said, guess what? They used the same story before Roswell. It was a weather balloon. And they retrieved it, and it would be best if they didn't tell anybody about it because it was involved in top secret warfare development. So nobody talked about it.
Could there have been a connection between? I'm even going to make it spread a wider net. The crash you're talking about, the one in Roswell, and the supposed base that's in Dulce, New Mexico? I mean, could they have been actually heading for that base and then crashed en route?
Well, they could have. New Mexico is truly a place of high strangeness. And we can talk about Dulce. It's an interesting development. I thought I'd really discovered something about Dulce a couple of weeks ago.
And actually, you know what? Hold that thought. hold that thought, because I just looked at the clock and we need to take a quick commercial break. So we'll come back. Let's come back about Dulce, because I find that whole area very interesting. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're here talking to Jerry Pippin of JerryPippin.com, and we'll be back with Jerry Pippin of JerryPippin.com after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.